Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Mims, the CEO of Dogwood Health Trust. As we strive to create a region where every generation can live, learn, earn, and thrive, no exceptions, a key step is to gain a deeper understanding of the knowledge gaps and the gaps and the assets in our region. And our communities have really told us that we need more specific information to Western North Carolina to help us inform and evaluate this work. So Dogwood continues to play a role in gathering key data. We have commissioned extensive studies in housing, early childhood education, K through 12 education, access to capital for small businesses, and now an analysis of the innovative ways in the region we can fuel economic growth in agriculture and food technology, or Agrifood Tech as it's known. We're so pleased to share this study with you today and to offer these reports for free. All can be accessed on our website at dogwoodhealthtrust.org for download. And these recordings will be available as well. I'd now like to introduce Sarah Thompson, our Community Investment Vice President for Economic Opportunity. And Sarah's going to share a little bit more about this study and how it relates to all of our economic opportunity strategies. Sarah?
Thank you, Dr. Mims, and many thanks to all of you for joining us today. Economic opportunity is a powerful tool for addressing poverty and an important factor in improving all the social drivers of health. Having a good job enables a person to live a life of purpose and to support themselves and their families. When developing our strategy for economic opportunity priority area of Dogwood, we talk to all of you, our partners, and we ask about the sectors of your local communities that stand out, and we hear about healthcare and tourism and manufacturing, but of course we also hear about agriculture because our region is full of small farms and lots of them. So this project with RTI aimed not just to assess the current state of the ag sector in the region, but really to look forward to opportunities that lie ahead for the sector to continue to grow and thrive long after we're all gone. In our region, agriculture has historically been a route to wealth creation for rural families, and Dogwood believes it's important to support business development within this key sector of our economy. So with that, I'd like to introduce our friends from RTI Innovation Advisors, a nonprofit research institute based in the Research Triangle. They partnered with us on this study, and I will introduce them to you now. Then they will go into their presentation, and afterwards we'll definitely have time for Q&A. As they talk, please go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and we'll monitor those and facilitate some Q&A afterwards. So first we have Dr. Amy Rydeen. Amy is an innovation advisor who works with organizations seeking improved global sustainability and health outcomes, especially large food manufacturers in the US. Amanda Rose is an innovation advisor who researches and advises clients on agriculture and food system innovation. Michael Hogan is an economic development analyst who specializes in helping local policymakers translate economic trends into actionable, locally informed strategies for inclusive economic development. And Aaron Love, the fourth author of the report, is an economist specializing in food systems analysis. So I'm now going to turn it over to Michael, Amanda, and Amy, who are with us today to share highlights of the study and answer your questions. And just a reminder, the report and a recording of this webinar are available or will be available on our website, dogwoodhealthtrust.org.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. It's wonderful to be with you all today. And thanks for this opportunity to partner with you all on this study. We so appreciate all the participants who are with us today. Thank you for taking time out of what we know will be busy schedules, especially at this time of year where there's a lot going on. So thank you very much. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Amanda Rose, and I'm joined today in presenting with my colleagues, Mike and Amy. Want to acknowledge that the study and the opportunities we're going to explore today were really co-created with other contributors at RTI, including Erin Love, Gabriela Santana, Aislinn Barefoot, and Tawanda Mazingi. So I want to say thank you to their contributions. And we also want to give a huge note of gratitude to the organizations that are featured on this slide here. Really talk about co-creation. We spoke to a number of you all in the region to better understand what makes Western North Carolina unique and what are the opportunities from the perspectives of stakeholders. And so just want to say thank you to the organizations and the individuals represented here for contributing to their work, this work. These ideas are very much yours as they are ours that we're sharing today. We're going to follow a pretty simple agenda today. You're going to hear a little bit of framing from me. We're going to pass to Mike to talk about some of the agricultural context of Western North Carolina. Then we're going to delve into 3 key opportunities that we have perceived in Agrifood Tech in Western North Carolina, ending with concluding messages. And of course, the Q&A, we're really excited to hear from you all what kind of questions this work brings up for you. We will be using a couple key terms that we want to define just at the beginning. So when we talk about the agri-food system, the definition we'll be using is an agricultural and food system that encompasses the value chain of food and non-food agricultural products from production to consumption. And you can see different segments of that value chain listed there. And then when we talk about agri-food tech, we're talking about agricultural and food technologies that are tools to enhance the productivity, sustainability, and/or profitability of the agri-food system. And these tools often arise from many scientific disciplines, such as life sciences or digital and computational domains. So this work is really centered on a key question that the Dogwood Health Trust team posed to us as a research team. And that is featured here, and it is: how might investment in agriculture and food technology spur inclusive and multi-generational economic and workforce development in the Dogwood Health Trust region of Western North Carolina? And you can see that region of focus is in the background of this question. And so just for reference for anyone who is kind of new to what we mean by Dogwood Health Trust region, it is that geographic footprint that's featured here on which we're focusing today. So you might be wondering, we're going to talk about these opportunities for agri-food tech. And how did we arrive at these specific opportunities that we'll explore in more detail? Well, this is a snapshot of our methodology that we used. And really important to this study is that we wanted to start first in identifying and understanding the regional assets and differentiators. What makes agriculture, and specifically agricultural innovation and agri-food tech opportunities, unique in the context of Western North Carolina? And so by starting there, we were then able to really contextualize current state and future agricultural, agri-food tech trends that really speak to opportunity to amplify the existing resources and the sources of momentum in the region. So we were trying to strike that balance between being really aspirational about what's possible, but also feasible and realistic in terms of kind of what's already available within the region. We have to kind of be blunt upfront to say that this analysis is not exhaustive. I hope you will see it as more of a starting point to get a conversation moving rather than kind of a summative evaluation of all the resources and opportunities within the region. You'll see that we spoke to a number of organizations. Those mirror the ones that you saw before. We tried our best to have kind of a diverse take on perspectives within the agri-food system, but this is really a fraction of the organizations and individuals that are actively engaged in the agri-food system of Western North Carolina. So if we really invite you to add, resources and ideas, initiatives to the things that you'll see today, and don't consider this as kind of a fixed set of resources and assets we'll be discussing. And as a research and team of innovation practitioners, we want to acknowledge up front that we appreciate that agri-food tech investments, really technology investments writ large, are not values neutral. We appreciate that equity and inclusion must be designed into agri-food tech investments from the outset. This is a very important kind of facet for us to explore with the Dogwood Health Trust, and certainly more work to be done to better understand these facets of agri-food tech investments in the region. We really appreciate that the very diverse agricultural landscape of Western North Carolina provides a lot of lenses through which to consider diversity, whether that's distance from urban centers, farm size, the demographics of the individuals involved in farming and agricultural operations and such. We also understand that there are good practices in how to center equity and inclusion in the design and development of agri-food tech investments. Just 2 of those are listed here, but really ensuring that farmers have a voice in defining innovation priorities and providing feedback along the technology development process. And right-sizing innovation and technology risk, understanding that agriculture itself is an inherently risky operation. So just wanted to acknowledge those realities up front, and certainly appreciate kind of an ongoing discussion on these facets of agri-food tech investment in the region. So with that, I'm pleased to hand over to Mike to hear a little bit more about agriculture in the context of Western North Carolina.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you to everybody who has kind of contributed to this throughout this process. In doing this work, as Amanda mentioned, our first step was to take a look at what are the regional assets and the regional differentiators that make the Dogwood region and Western North Carolina unique in an agri-food context. It's important to us that as we look at this, we recognize that the type of technology or the type of solution that might be applicable or useful in one region of North Carolina or the Southeast, or another part of the country, may not necessarily be applicable in Western North Carolina. So in doing so, we took an initial look at both qualitative and quantitative data to get an understanding of what are the real assets, the real differentiators, and some of the challenges that are faced today by the agri-food economy in the Dogwood region. And so just to provide a little bit of context, based on data from the USDA Ag Census and other quantitative data sources, we found it important to acknowledge that the Western North Carolina and the Dogwood region, talking about these 18 counties plus the Qualla boundary, make up about 15% of the total volume, the total count of farms in North Carolina. But those farms tend to be small. It's only about 7% of the total farmland and about 3% of the total market value of agricultural products sold in North Carolina. Additionally, looking along the supply chain, the region has about 5% of the state's total employment in food and food products manufacturing. As we mentioned, it's a farm community that's composed of smaller family-run farms. They generate a diversity of crops, livestock, and products. And as we look at it, about half of the farms, just over half, are under 50 acres, and nearly 3/4 of the farms are generating $10,000 or less in total annual sales. What that means for us is that it's a farming and an agricultural production community that is small, that is decentralized, and many people who are involved in the farming and the agri-food system are not deriving their sole or primary source of income from agriculture or food production. And finally, the mountainous geography is a component that limits the size and the volume that's available for production. So it necessitates that value comes from niche specialty crops. And it's very different, but we think that it complements the margin-driven, volume-driven farming that we see in the central and eastern parts of North Carolina. So on the next slide, as I noted before, it's not defined by a high volume or high dollar value of products sold, but a large and diverse mix of farms and products. As you see in the map on the right, the highest volume of agricultural products sold in the most recent data that's available, which is the 2017 Ag Census, is coming from Burke and Henderson counties. across the whole region, the 6,800 farms generated about 382 million, or about 3% of the state's total dollar value of agricultural production. But within this, and as we start to unpack it, we see that it's a very diverse and a very unique agri-food economy. As you know, there is a mountainous geography and many microclimates, which facilitates the growing and production of unique products, unique agricultural products, crops, vegetables. It's many small farms that are decentralized and disaggregated. It's a number of unique and diverse products. Many farmers that are generating multiple income streams, adding on top of their production, other jobs, agritourism, and other sources of income. And then finally, a region that's facing a lot of very unique challenges today, not limited to the development pressures that are coming in from high land costs, high housing costs, and many competing priorities for economic development in the region. And so we think that kind of as we look at the region, it's important for us to take into account the unique diversity and the unique profile of products that are generated in the region. And finally, to close out in this section, we do also see that Western North Carolina is competitive in several categories. When we look at the types of agricultural products, fruits and vegetables, livestock, and other agricultural products, and look at where the counties, where these 18 counties plus the Qualla boundary in Western North Carolina are kind of out-competing or have an above average production, include some specialty vegetables, a number of food processing industries, including beverage products. Think about the brewery industry in the western part of the state. Additionally, greenhouse and floriculture products. This includes Christmas trees, but also cut flowers, specialty herbs, florist greens. Livestock is another big piece. That's kind of unique in that it's a lot more sheep and goats, aquaculture, cattle, and dairy products. Again, kind of complementing the concentrated hog and poultry industry that we see in central and eastern North Carolina. And then a number of unique fruits, including apples, other types of berries. If you're interested in looking at all of the data that we pulled together to do this, that is going to be in detail in the report that's on our website, and it has a breakdown of many of the different products that are reported in the Ag Census alongside some of the other data that we collected to do this. So if you do have some unique or specific data questions, please take a look at the report on the website. But as you know, and to sum up kind of this first phase of work, which was summarizing the current state and those differentiators for the region, there are some kind of unique pieces of the agri-food system in Western North Carolina. A large number of small farms, high direct-to-consumer sales, a lot of activity in specialty products that have opportunities to kind of improve and increase the value add. Things like cheese, jams, specialty fruits, vegetables, and meats, natural fibers and fiber products, health and wellness products. And also keeping in mind that when we look at the farming and the food production community, farming is not the primary or sole source of income for most farmers. Many folks who are involved in farming and food production are taking advantage of the tax benefits related to present use valuation and that reduced property tax for maintaining farmland. It's an acknowledgement of the reality of the challenges of the geography, the development pressures, and the high land costs in the region. But also it's important to keep in mind as we're looking at innovations and new technologies that it's a region of the state and a unique region of the Southeast that has a very entrepreneurial culture, a history of entrepreneurship, and folks who are traditionally used to having many sources of income and finding different ways to be entrepreneurial and resilient. So we think that this sets the stage for kind of a unique set of opportunities for agri-food tech in Western North Carolina.
Great. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Rydeen, and I will talk through the opportunities for agri-food tech in Western North Carolina in partnership with Mike as well. And I'd like to start with the question that Amanda posed at the beginning of our presentation. And that is really how might investment in agriculture and food technology spur inclusive and multi-generational economic and workforce development in the Dogwood Health region of Western North Carolina. So as we consider development, it's really imperative that that development is guided by a vision, and that vision really reflects the values and the priorities of this region. So on the screen here, you'll see a vision that by no means is RTI's vision. This vision really culminated from fantastic conversations we had with all the stakeholders that were involved in this study. So the vision is a vibrant and community-led agri-food system that safeguards the region's natural resources, reflects the community values of hard work, self-sufficiency, and creativity, proves resilience amid climate change and other disruptions, thus enabling rural communities and farm families to thrive for generations to come. So that vision really begs this question, well, how do we realize that vision? How do we get closer to achieving that vision? And to do that, we see these 3 opportunity spaces that can guide future investment in agri-food tech in the region. So the 3 opportunity spaces are climate resilience, value added, and closed loop. And we'll go through each of these in detail. So I'll start with climate resilience. So climate resilient opportunity is really about enabling farmers to proactively manage risks and grow farm-based income amid the uncertainty of climate change. So why does this make sense for this region? A lot of what you're going to hear kind of echoes what Mike had shared, because these opportunities were really born of understanding the unique differentiators of the region, and then understanding, like Amanda said, how does that couple with global trends in agri-food technology? So this region, like we mentioned, is majority small family farms, which means that climate resiliency is going to look very different in this space than in other regions where large-scale commodity crops kind of drive agriculture. And most importantly, through our conversations, we acknowledge that the impacts of climate change and shifts in weather patterns are taking hold, and they're impacting the productivity of the farms. So we know that late season freezes and frosts, wetter and warmer summers are having impacts, and that's driving demand for new technology, new solutions, and new approaches to do farming, and not only build and address challenges of today, but start to build resiliency and preparedness for what might come in the future. What we're really excited about is that it was brought to our attention that there's such a highly motivated and eager younger generation of farmers who are excited to do things differently, implement new practices, be a little bit more innovative. And that really lends itself well to this kind of intersection of climate change and how it may shift and change. And lastly, when we think about climate resiliency, having short supply chains and access to local fresh food is really important. And this region has such a strong direct-to-consumer and near-to-farm markets already in place. So the CSA programs and the farmers markets are great adds in terms of climate resiliency. So in our work, we wanted to make sure that these opportunities are really embedded and they reflect what's happening already in the region. So there's so much momentum already in place. And on this slide, we're just profiling a few of the organizations and programs that are already on the ground working towards this opportunity. By no means is this an exhaustive representation, and we know that there's so much other work going on that's not here, but just to highlight a few different organizations that came to our attention. ASAP, which is the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, they run a local farm guide that highlights food producers, restaurants, and other organizations that buy from local farmers so that consumers can shop and buy food that's been sourced locally. There's also NG Choices, which hosts the Etsy of meat. It's called Meat Suite. It's really cool. It's an online platform that you can essentially go and pick out different cuts of meats. In terms of supporting farmers in bringing on new technology, finding new sustainable models, business models, Ag Launch Engine, Ag Options are two really interesting programs that we found who are doing great work towards supporting farmers, not only with de-risking new technology, but also finding new pathways to building wealth. And then lastly, I mentioned this next generation of farmers. The 4-H Club plays a really pivotal role in educating and helping preserve farming and farming as a profession and a way of life in the region. And then the last point I want to mention is the climate infrastructure. So this region is home to so many different institutes and centers that are already well positioned to really highlight this region as a climate kind of center of excellence. So if you are the Cooperative Institute for Climate and Satellites, the National Climatic Data Center, and the National Center for Environmental Information. I will conclude with just a few takeaway messages. So this opportunity, a few things we want you to walk away with. First is that ag can really be a buffer against not only climate, but other disruptions. Having really strong local supplies of food helps a region build preparedness for future disruptions. There is support needed. There's demand in place. Impacts of climate change are playing out in the region, and that is really creating a request and a demand for innovative and new approaches to farming. But there's a diversity in needs. Mike kind of drove this point home. These farmers, there's a lot of really great variability in the types of crops that are grown in the region. So that just highlights the emphasis that moving forward on this opportunity will have to reflect the collective ambition of the farmer community, and that a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. And then lastly, the next generation is motivated. And I think this is just really exciting to think that there's so many young farmers who are really interested and inspired to keep and preserve farming in the community. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mike, and he'll talk to value added.
Thank you, Amy. As we mentioned in the overview of the region, one of the things that makes Western North Carolina unique and is a real regional asset and differentiator is that while the region does not necessarily compete on the large volume of production that we see in other parts of the state, other parts of the Southeast, it is a region that is uniquely positioned to have a strong and diversified market for value-added food and agricultural products, and in doing so, building kind of high-quality jobs within the food value chain. We see this because the region is already a recognized leader in some unique natural and value-added products. There is a culture of self-sufficient and entrepreneurial communities. The region has a strong connection to many urban centers and a lot of regional tourists that are coming in that have the potential and the buying power to support direct sales. Along with that comes a strong brand, and the region is home to microclimates that allow for the production of really unique high value products and businesses. Thinking of things like ramps, wild greens, ginger, ginseng, things that grow in the very unique kind of multiple microclimates that we see in Western North Carolina that go along with kind of a lot of the market forces that are coming from the buying power of tourists, the strong brand of the region, and the broad kind of regional and national interest in some of these unique specialty products. So as we go in and look at the infrastructure that's already in place, a lot of it is here. There's a lot of infrastructure in place where we can start, where this value-added food sector is already kind of growing and being supported. I do want to note that as I talk through this, this is nowhere near an exhaustive list of all of the assets and all the activities that are going on in the region. This is just a small subset that gives us and gives kind of this group an overview of some of the activities that are going on in the region related to value-added food and agricultural products, sales, production, manufacturing, and sales. Those include several commercial kitchens and incubators, of which we've listed just a few here. A number of already successful value-added food and beverage companies, Gaia Herbs, No Evil Foods, Devil's Foot, many breweries and wineries in the region that have been successful and really built this brand for the kind of the food and specialty food and beverage products sector for the region. There are a number of markets that are available in the region, ranging from the large farmers market and livestock market to many tailgate markets all across the region. And then a number of CSAs and direct sales. This goes from producers who are selling food through CSIs direct to consumers to Asheville restaurants that are using that buying power to source a lot of their products locally and serve that in a kind of a fine dining establishment to really support that thriving food and restaurant industry. And there are many food processing companies and aggregators in the region. But as we've noticed, there are also several gaps and several opportunities for kind of next steps and areas that we see opportunities to look as kind of we move forward and take away some of our findings from looking at the potential for the value-added sector in the region. The first is that it's driven by small businesses, and small businesses need unique support. It's a decentralized, it's a very geographically dispersed community, and oftentimes entrepreneurs can struggle to access those support networks and services. So there are opportunities to streamline those resources. Being that it's a small business community, there's a need to do things at a scale that fits the needs of the businesses in the region. There have been many efforts to support, for example, a large-scale food aggregator, a meat processing facility, and those have met kind of various obstacles and have not been able to follow through over the last few years. And we see this as an example of opportunities for experimentation in smaller scale aggregators or more flexible business models that can serve the scale and the size of the farmers and producers in Western North Carolina. There are gaps in the product testing and production, particularly to be able to get things up to the specs required by the USDA and FDA to be able to meet larger scale production and then do some of that product testing and bring some of those products to the market. And in doing so, a big takeaway for us also is there is a lot of value add opportunity today, and also to keep in mind the value add of tomorrow. What are the kind of high value crops that might flourish and where demand might be in the region and kind of the surrounding region in the next 10 to 15 years? I'm looking at some of the region's kind of flagship high value crops, but also some of the opportunities that are there, not just today, but as we look at shifting demand for food and beverage products coming from consumers, shifting pressures that are coming from climate change and some of the development pressures in the region, where are the opportunities for value add 10 to 15 years down the road? And to wrap it up, I'll pass it back to Amy to talk about our third component.
Okay, so the final opportunity is closed loop. And this is to catalyze a regional agri-food tech system that models the principles of a circular economy. So before I jump into how does that fit with Western North Carolina, I just want to offer a few introductory words on circular economy and closed loop systems. So circular economies are essentially it's a shift away from past kind of linear models where we extract resources, we manufacture and create goods, and then we place those goods somewhere where they become waste, and that waste has no pathway to additional value creation. So circular systems are one that finds innovative ways to repurpose waste and bring it back into the economy, or better yet, it's the design of systems from the outset, such that there is no waste generated in the economy. Circular or closed loop thinking also can apply to nature and natural ecosystems. So the cycling of nutrients, water, gases within our ecosystem. And this type of circular thinking has really caught on in the field of kind of carbon sequestration, carbon markets, and carbon offsets. And essentially that's just the concept that if we're emitting certain gases in one place, that those are then sequestered and brought back into the ecosystem in another place. So to bring that kind of concept of circularity and closed loop into Western North Carolina, we're really excited by this opportunity because it really is representative of one of the hallmark features of Western North Carolina culture, and that is the emphasis on relationship building. So this is really looking to one another and sharing across families, across communities, and across businesses. And we were so excited to see many examples of circularity thinking already playing out in the region. So we heard a lot about waste vegetables or spent brewery grain being fed to cattle, so repurposing of waste. There's also, the region is home to indigenous cultures that have been upholding systems thinking for generations, and they really emphasize maintaining healthy water, soil, and nutrient cycles on the farm. So if we look to infrastructure and ongoing activities already in the region around regenerative ag, there are many kind of schools in place that teach these types of practices. So for example, the Organic Growers School, they provide classes and workshops for farmers on holistic crop management. The Biltmore Forest School is the first U.S. educational program in forestry, and this really translated regenerative forestry practices that were developed in Europe into the United States and has been adopted across the region and the nation. There's also examples where carbon sequestration and carbon markets are being explored in the region, as well as I mentioned waste upcycling. And one specific example I'd like to highlight is the Industrial Commons. We had a fantastic conversation with them about their material return program, where they've successfully been able to recycle waste from the textile industry into new raw materials. So they have successfully stood up a circular system in the textile industry. So a few takeaway message is in this space, we should really lead with curiosity. Circularity and closed loops are really complex systems, and they require balancing the needs of many different stakeholders and relationship networks, and those can be challenging to do. So we really recommend in starting to think about circular systems to just engage in a lot of learning and dialogue, and to look to the successes in the region that have already emerged. And notably the Industrial Commons example that I had just mentioned. And that efforts to kind of support and shore up circularity really could focus on the systems and the infrastructure that manage and formalize or professionalize relationships. So formal tracking and management systems will be really beneficial, not just to food and ag, but to circularity across any industry and across multiple industries. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Amanda, and she's going to tie it up with a few concluding messages, and then we can move into the Q&A portion.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Amy and Mike. Yep, so we can go to the next slide and just offer a few final thoughts. So hopefully today you're walking away, and we certainly as a research team walked away with an appreciation that agriculture in Western North Carolina is unique. And this is a good thing. It means that Western North Carolina is well positioned to differentiate itself within the state, the Southeast region, and beyond. And so looking ahead, as you all are participating in the agri-food system, you're engaged in making change happen, just hope that you're able to celebrate this unique value-added position that the region offers. Second, we see opportunity for agri-food investments in Western North Carolina, kind of embedded in those three opportunity spaces that you heard described by Amy and Mike. But we see the technology investment as an enabler of broader change, not necessarily the primary drivers. It's often easy to get kind of focused on investing in technology because it's tangible. There are clear outputs and deliverables to which you're driving. But we know technology investments in these kind of systems are necessary but not sufficient to bring about that generational, transformational change that was centered in the question that the Dogwood Health Trust team asked. And so we just want to remember that while technology investments can be critical to kind of enabling momentum, filling critical gaps, also balancing that with relationships and networks that are required to really bring the system to a different place as a whole. While stepping away from this research, we were really heartened by the number of resources that are already in play in the region. And certainly acknowledging that stakeholder feedback pointed to the fact that some of these resources aren't as accessible, and the users of those resources aren't as aware of them being available as possible. And so just want to kind of encourage as a starting point to think about how you might leverage existing resources as a next step from this research. And finally, we're leaving the study feeling optimistic that the future is bright for agri-food system change and technology-enabled change in Western North Carolina. We're especially energized by kind of the acknowledgement of an ambitious and lifestyle-driven younger generation of farmers, digital natives who are embracing change, but also the kind of the culture and the heritage that comes with agricultural and farming in the region. So again, as a research team, we're just optimistic and hoping to leave you with that message today. Finally, just want to say thanks again to the Dogwood team for kind of partnering and allowing us into this inquiry with them, and thanking you all for your participation today. We really appreciate it and looking forward to your questions. So thanks.
Super. Thank you all so much. It's just so interesting and lots of great information. And please do read the whole report on the website. It goes into much greater detail and talks a lot about the various stakeholder interviews and you know, everyone that was participating in this conversation had a lot to contribute, and I think they really captured it in the report. So here's a question. What are 3 or 4 programs or projects that you would undertake if you wanted to move forward with this vision? Who wants to take that one?
I can start, and then maybe, given we were given 3 or 4, each of us can name one.
Sure.
One of the ones that I was interested in, I believe it's ASAP, and you'll have to correct me, Amy, if that's the wrong organization, but understanding that there's ongoing investment in greenhouses of different scales and sizes within the region. And we got kind of an indication that demand for those resources always outstrips kind of what is available at any given time. And that continues to be an ongoing request from the community. So I think kind of taking stock of existing sources of demand that go unmet, that seems to me like a clear place to start. And that's one example that was surfaced in the study.
Great, thank you.
I can offer another example.
Mm-hmm.
So another would be exploring diversification of crops and expanding into new crops that might not be kind of represented in the data that Mike had already presented. And this, I think, is very forward thinking and experimental. And I love kind of dabbling in what might we grow 10 years from now and kind of starting to build the systems and the technology to catalyze that shift.
Great, thank you. What about you, Michael?
One component would be strengthening the infrastructure and support that's available for small and medium-sized businesses that are looking to scale and grow in the food, kind of the value-added food and beverage products space. So this goes from kind of your incubator kitchens to larger commercial kitchens, and then some of those facilities that are needed, things like cold storage, logistics and distribution, and then having kind of the funding mechanisms and entrepreneurial support that surrounds them, I think would be another component of that.
Super. So did the research identify any educational or training needs to support the sector?
I would say that through our research, I think the takeaway is that there are a lot of organizations who provide training and support, and perhaps the need that surfaced as highest priority is actually the kind of aggregation and helpful orientation to with whom you find that support and training. So although there is just a plentiful amount of resources available to this community, it's not always quite clear with whom or how to engage with those resources.
Yeah. Let's see. How about I think of seed as a powerful technology that has a lot of power for climate resilience and regional adaptation. Does this fit under the concept of agri-food tech? I'm not sure. Do you understand that question?
Yes, so I take it as kind of improved seed. So thinking about productivity, pest resilience, kind of all of those characteristics.
Okay, sure.
And yes, I think it absolutely does. And what is really, I think from an innovation perspective, really an opportunity and a challenge, you know, those are the flip sides of the same coin, is that as climate change impacts emerge, they really are super contextual, super kind of like land at a plot level in a different way. And so I think one of the interesting kind of innovation questions around seed is how do you actually go to a more nuanced kind of perspective on what an individual plot or kind of ecosystem level will need beyond kind of the large platform seeds that we have right now.
I see. Thank you. So there has been a history of co-ops in our region, and we still have a few. So what's your view as far as this type of aggregation system goes?
In terms of the production co-ops or different types?
I think they're more referring to aggregators. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think throughout, you know, agriculture's history, kind of the aggregation process has been really powerful. And I think a lot of other communities have gained value in trying to bring the value add closer to the farm and thinking about how do those sources of or points of aggregation actually allow folks to kind of add value incrementally along the value chain instead of thinking it has to go to kind of a fully concentrated source later. So I think that's, to Mike's point around scale and value add, like just getting a little bit more like creative along the value chain and figuring out where those points of entry are for folks along the way. I don't know if colleagues have other things to say about that.
Here's one. What implications does your research have on the food distribution system, such as food banks, which we know are seeing much greater need now than in the years past?
My voice is coming in strong, folks, so happy colleagues if you like. I can jump in.
I was just going to mention like cold chain infrastructure and making sure that transportation and processing is in place and locally. So we're not kind of exporting food to be processed elsewhere and then bringing it back into. So I think infrastructure to bring fresh, healthy foods to the farm directly to those food banks would be a really great opportunity.
Did you want to add something? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I will say that we know that there are significant challenges related to food access, and food banks have been under greater pressure as we've seen more challenges related to job loss and folks losing their homes. And we know that that's a very significant and challenging issue. It is one that we did not look at in depth in this study in terms of food access, but it is one that that we're very, very aware of. And one component of building a local, like a stronger local food system is that resiliency. And we talked about a little bit earlier on. So I will say that, you know, that makes up one component of that food value chain and the supply chain within the region, and does kind of fit closely with that resiliency.
Thanks. I'm going to take the next one. What are the motivators for the Dogwood Health Trust for requesting this study? Was it driven more by inquiry into regional health that local agriculture can improve, or realization that agri-food tech can strengthen local economies? Both, really. So we see agriculture as an economic driver and an important sector of our economy, but it's also a health consideration, and access to healthy local food is an important aspect to the overall health of our communities, tightening down our food systems, creating food security for the people that live here for years to come. So that's kind of a neat thing about the Dogwood Health Trust, is that we're really looking at all of these issues very holistically. So although we commissioned this study through the economic opportunity area of Dogwood, we have folks on our health and wellness team who are doing food systems work themselves, who will also be using this information. So we really do try to, merge all of our work together, because we see these issues through a holistic lens. Let me see. There was a very specific question I'd like to get to. Can you share more about what you meant by, or give examples of formal tracking and management systems that benefit the circular economy?
Sure. So, I mean, these are really just online databases that track, and the future of a lot of this kind of supply chain logistics management is actually heading towards kind of cloud-based infrastructure, more technology that embeds data within particular food packaging. So there's a huge amount of investment and innovation happening on global food scale, global food supply, in terms of data analysis, data supporting, and then all of that, essentially, once you have data on all of your individual food, just derives so much insights about where might food be spoiling, et cetera. So there's a lot of work just to do, kind of like shore up the technology that allows for verification and validation of the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting question, and I wonder if any of your interviews touched on this. Do you have a sense of, you talked a lot about the younger farmers and the passion of a lot of younger folks to get into agriculture. Do you know, did you talk about how many are from here? Are they, inheriting their family farm? Are they homegrown? Are they being drawn to the region? Did you come up with any conversations around that in your interviews?
So a lot of that kind of particular information came out of stakeholder interviews. So data exists, but right now the best source of data we have is the Ag Census that we kind of referenced, but it's from 2017. So we are kind of anxiously awaiting the release of the next iteration, hopefully sometime this coming year. So I think that'll be an awesome opportunity to kind of get more in the weeds of like current state. But I do think it sounded like there was a mix. There is that kind of generational changeover of ownership that is happening more and more often as kind of the folks get older and from the baby boomer generation and new folks enter. There's also kind of an energy and a lot more programming and support of folks entering the farming and occupation. And I saw a question from someone around financing needs. And definitely that is a constraint. It is an extremely expensive business to get into. And so as you think about kind of generational change from Western North Carolina, if it's not within the family system, how people actually enter into the profession is a really big question, and financing is big. And there's some more recent data that kind of equity issues in financing accessibility from different demographic groups and such, that really is a constraint as well. So it's not kind of, cut and dry from a financing aspect perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So, Michael, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, but it was, the question specifically was around green financing or creative capital solutions. And I think Amanda touched on the need for that. It's certainly something that Dogwood is very honed in on. I hope some of you saw another study we recently commissioned regarding the availability of capital to small businesses in the region. That could be any kind of small business, that could be a small farm business. And so, you know, recognizing that this is often a barrier, but that other parts of the state, country, and the world are getting quite creative around green financing. Is there anything you'd like to add?
The one piece that that just looking a little bit over the state border in Tennessee was a conversation we had with an organization called Ag Launch in Tennessee that's doing a number of really creative models for financing and bringing new demand-driven technology that's very focused on small farmers and providing them kind of the first assessing their needs and then providing them with the tools, financing, and ability to implement new technologies on the farm. So they're based in Tennessee, but they're doing work all throughout the Southern Appalachians. And we thought that was a very interesting model. And I unfortunately could not do justice to the kind of creative and unique work that they're doing. But Ag Launch, based out of Tennessee, looks like a very unique and promising financing model.
Great. So there is one more question I'd like to get to, but first I'm going to touch on the question in the chat that talks about data-enabled farming and are we wired for this? And I think that refers to broadband. And I just want to assure y'all that, you know, no, not all of the areas are, but that is a priority, I think, of every state, federal, and local organization that works on economic development. We are, including Dogwood, we are very aware of the need for broadband for all of our, you know, healthcare, economic development, you know, education, all of the sectors that we focus on recognize that widespread availability and subscription to the internet is something we need to continue to advocate, to fund, to work on, and we are doing that. So I'm going to close it out with one final question. Do you have any insight on how to address those in the field who experience disparate health and wealth outcomes, for example, migrant farm workers?
Well, that's quite a big question, and I'm not sure we can do justice in the time available. One of the places that we suggested as a next step that you'll see in the study, especially regarding kind of assuring more equitable outcomes in the agri-food system, which we know has historically kind of linked to really inequitable systems in our country, is better and more nuanced data. And better understanding of who is actually operating on farms, who's benefiting from, you know, the wealth creation or not. There's just seems to be a dearth of information. So I think with information, then you can start to make more informed decisions and investment strategies. And in the absence of that, you know, it's really hard. So that's just one suggestion of where might we start. And it's a really hard population to do that for, but I know a lot of creative people are working on that. Wasn't a focus of this study, but, you know, thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm. And finally, there's a question around whether we're planning on funding a study around food security, or has one been done recently. And we are, as I mentioned, we have folks on our health and wellness team who are very focused on food security and food systems. And we also have our Impact Health, which is the Healthy Opportunities pilot that Dogwood is managing, and food security is of primary focus for those folks too. So please, to all of you who are joining us today, make sure that you are receiving our newsletters. If you go right to dogwoodhealthtrust.org, you can sign up to get them. And once you're on our mailing list, every time we do a study or offer a webinar, you will be notified about it. So you'll be able to keep track of the various research that we do, the various learning that we want to share with the region. So thank you, Amy and Amanda and Michael so much. It was really a pleasure working with RTI Innovation Advisors. And to the audience, thank you for joining us during your lunch hour today. I really do encourage you to pull up the report off the website and browse through it. It's very easy to digest and really pretty inspiring and interesting. So take a little time to look through that, and please reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions about this work. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and enjoy the holiday season. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.